Hi guys, I'm Sully, Suilion for long, and today I'm here with my friend,
Hi everyone, I'm Jade Jezabella, Jade for short.
and today we'll be doing a redraw and redesign challenge.
So for the redesign bit, I decided that Sully would try her hand at April, which may be my first ever OC. She is definitely a Rainbow Dash ripoff and an accidental sparkle dog. I had a dream about a breathing ball and I wanted to design something off of that, but I didn't have the skill to pull what I wanted from my dream into an actual drawing. So I'm hoping Sully can do something fun with the concept. That would make 14-year-old me happy.
Well, I'll give it a go at least. According to Jade, April first appeared in a dream. She was a chibi-style Inu, detachable tail, and somehow inspired by breathing balls. Yeah, breathing balls. It was so weird and wonderful that after glancing at the reference for about 0.2 seconds, the idea just clicked. I started out by sketching some poses to get a feel for her form. I was especially drawn to the way breathing balls can fold into themselves. It reminded me of biblically accurate angels, and of course, the memes that come with them. That surreal energy really stuck with me, so I leaned into it. I chose chaos. The original design of April is very much my first OC done steel, part sparkle dog and obviously made in paint. But it's a character that's really grown on me. There's just something about her, you know? But my challenge was to redesign her, so why not go full send. I landed on a pose that shows off her front, with wings stretched wide, imposing and kinda smug. Then came the ribbons. You'll see them here, floating around her like the wheels surrounding those angelic beings. Her hind legs lead into this fluffy, poofy tail, and the wings? I imagine them being delicate and angelic, but made out of that thin, bendy plastic, the kind you'd find on a knockoff toy or a dollar store model kit. Line art is always fun. I just pick a random brush, or pencil, or whatever I feel like, and then go ham. I usually don't go back and forth much. I establish the lines I want pretty quickly, using whatever tools I find necessary or just freehanding them by pure force of will. For the wing design, I played around with how to show that cheap plastic feel, eventually settling on these interlocking plates that mimic those old 90s building kits. I added little circular connectors and line segments, trying to keep the design consistent across all the wings. Was I successful? Unclear. I kinda got lost in the details. When I got to coloring, I decided to keep her fur pretty bold and saturated, but relatively simple, because the wings were going to be the star of the show. I did put a lot of patterns on her face, because even though her fur design is relatively simple compared to what it used to be in the old design, I still wanted the eye of the observer to be drawn towards her face, her eyes. And what better way than to surround that one with more details? And then came the fun part, texture. I built up layers to give the wings a more feathery look, still channeling that biblically accurate energy, but through plastic. Finally, I overlaid a rainbow gradient across the wings for that dramatic, radiant finish. And that brings us to the final design. Biblically accurate April. Can maybe be found at the discount aisle for 70% off, but only if you know the science of where to look. Are you ready to see April?
Yes.
So do you want to hear my core design element for April?
Yes, please.
So you said breathing ball, and I was like, biblically accurate angel.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh my goodness! Oh my god! Dude, oh my goodness. Dude, that is not what I expected from that silhouette. Oh my god, I was expecting Nightmare Fuel, but she's like, she's an angel. She's just, oh my god.
Okay, so there's a little bit of nightmare fuel though. The background is very
Oh
corrupted
yeah.
presence.
Oh yeah. Ooh. Oh, I love the bow around her. That is, dude, oh my god. Oh, you gave her freckle? Also, I love that you actually got incorporated breathing ball with the ribbon. I didn't think you would be able to do that, but you did it really.
We're always up for a challenge, huh?
I just looked at the color references. She has rainbow.
Of course.
Her Sparkle Dog origin lives on. But you did really good. Thank you so much.
It was a blast.
All right. Is it my turn?
It is your turn. And for Jade's redesign, I had this old unique character named Nova. She is a Dragonborn druid, and her whole design element is that she's a seamstress, and the cloth that she's wearing in the original piece has embroidered stars on it. She was a Circle of the Stars druid, Star Guardian, guardian of the stars, if you will.
Before I started out on my redesign journey, I explored all the aspects of Nova's old character design, trying to pinpoint exactly what made her, her, and as Sully had stated, everything about Nova ties back to stars, be it her name, her looks, and her outfit. This made it easier for me to understand how I could expand the concept, and also see what parts needed improvement in order to get the theme across. My immediate thought was to push the shape of the head crest. In the old design, I read the crest of the head more as like a crown shape, and I wanted it to be very obviously a star. Feathers were also a big part of her old design, taking up a lot of space and covering her from head to tail tip. I wanted to cut back on them, so I gave her a simple cockatoo crest for a cleaner silhouette and to keep her design redraw friendly. The feathery hair in the old design also reminded me a lot of Sully's other character, Sky, so I wanted to give Nova a more unique, quote-unquote hairstyle, and personally, I think she rocks it. Her muzzle in the old design is a bit confusing to me in terms of shapes, but I wanted to work with the shapes given, and I gave her teeth that sort of protrude from her lips, which sounds more terrifying than it is intended. I also think this is the first time I've ever drawn a Dragonborn character, so the proportions and shapes were a bit unfamiliar to me, but I have drawn a dinosaur or two, and what is a dragon but a spicy dinosaur? To me, her old outfit and staff invoked the visual of a shepherd, and that felt very fitting seeing as she could summon animals, so I decided to stick with a similar outfit. I kept the loose fit fabric, draped it over one shoulder, and affixed it with a brooch that doubles as a needle cushion. I gave her a glittery sequins undershirt and pulled a bit of that sequins into the dress itself. Her belt is rather simple, it's just a measuring tape she tied around her waist, and her staff is now a giant needle, giving her a weapon that's both pointy and blunt, and tying back to her job as a seamstress. As you can see in the speed paint, I scrapped my original idea for the recolor and went for a blue, teal, and yellow color palette instead. Compared to her old design, she is much lighter, leaning more to a blue tone instead of straight up silver. I changed her eyes from green to silver and pulled in 3 different shades of yellow. The teal is now also solely on her feathers. I struggled a lot with the tail feathers. I wanted to tie in the green, but I failed on my original concept because of my decision to change the angle of the tail. I went back and forth on it a lot, and in the end I decided to settle, because sometimes art is hard, and then you move on.
Are you ready?
Born ready.
Cool. Okay. Here you go.
Oh, she looks like she was properly designed by someone who knows colors. There's so many details like this with the clothing draped over, and then it's sort of like a skin-tight suit. And then the brooch is like a pin cushion, and the belt is a measuring band.
Yeah.
Very creative. I think it looks very good.
Thank you. Yeah. I am so glad you read all those elements, because I was worried it would just be clutter.
I'm also a very big fan of yellow and blue, and you've also dragged in the light blue on her skin instead of, because originally she was a silver dragonborn.
Yeah, I sort of took silver with a grain of salt. I'll tweak it a little bit.
I mean, for sure, I did not know what I was doing back in the day when I first made Nova.
Dude, I am not one to talk. You did see April.
I suppose so. But one final compliment is it looks like Nova could actually be inserted into a cartoon or something now.
Thank you. That is a huge compliment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. For the scene redraw, I decided to give Sully this still frame from a map art I did, featuring two of my OCs back in the day, Fenna the dragon and Puzzlement the thing. Fenna, I decided to retire after this. She is not relevant, so Sully will be working with a different character, a winged wolf named Noble. The scene is taking place inside of Puzzlement's dream, where they come to Fenna and they wish to become a dragon. As you can tell, I cranked the saturation up to extreme, and yeah, I don't know what to say. Good luck.
I'm on it. Whenever I start working on a bigger art piece like this, I usually begin with thumbnails. They're a quick, low commitment way to figure out composition, what goes where, how things flow, all without getting bogged down in the details too early. In the original artwork, we see Puzzlement. They are the brown one in the background, stumbling upon the white one, Fenna, in the foreground. I wanted to turn the picture around to take a new angle, so to say, on this art piece. I wanted it to feel like Puzzlement sort of came upon this other character, so I always had them placed in the corner or as the focus, looking towards the other character. After sketching out the different thumbnails, I came back to them the next day to see which one I liked the most, and I settled on this one where we see Puzzlement sort of approaching a mysterious figure. I start rendering out a very rough sketch with a new sketch on top of it. I wanted to start with Puzzlement because they're sort of the focus, where I want the eye of the observer to go first, and I want the line to go towards the other character, so it's very important to get Puzzlement right. I had a tough time locking down Puzzlement's pose. I wanted something that captured their curiosity while fitting into the landscape and still showing off their really cute design. I eventually settled on this moment where they're pushing aside some tall grass to get a better look at this radiant, otherworldly creature ahead, along with the strange plants that seem to have sprung around its presence. For this piece, Jade asked me to switch Fenna out with another character, Nobel. As I started planning the scene, I drew inspiration from how I pictured the Feywild or the fairy realms in D&D, full of things that feel magical, strange, and just a little bit off in the best way. I wanted the energy to sort of leak out from where Nobel is in the image, sort of like it's blurring into reality. My goal was to make Nobel feel like she belonged in that strange space, while Puzzlement looked like they'd wandered in completely by accident. With the base sketch down, I moved to line art. I tend to work foreground to background when doing detail work. It helps me stay focused and consistent. I added little flowers and leave some extra colors up front. While this area will ultimately be blurred in the final art piece, I still wanted to go through the process of making a foreground. I don't usually draw a lot of scene drawings, and I want to get better. And sometimes that means doing all the nitty-gritty work so you learn from it, even if you're just gonna blur it out in the end. With the foreground being done, I started working on Puzzlement. I wanted the line work to carry weight, but still be thin and delicate where it needed to be. Working on the line art for Puzzlement was really nice. I love rendering out feathers, and the texture on their fur was really interesting, as I tried to mix in a couple longer strands around their head. The tail is also a really cool piece. It reminds me of those Dutch angel dragons in a way. Drawing Puzzlement's hand or paw was really difficult, because I needed it to look like they were really pushing the grass aside, while also not making it a human hand or too animalistic, because the way the paw was angled made it hard to see what was going on. The midground was next. I broke it into two parts: the natural terrain Puzzlement is moving through, and the strange curly fantasy elements that surround Nobel. That's when I started introducing those spiky curly bushes, and a little path leading towards Nobel. Then I start adding in the trees and the spiky fantasy plants that sort of leak out from where Nobel is in the picture. After all the foreground and midground elements were down, it was Nobel's turn. Again, I started with Nobel's face, but this time the challenge was in the proportions. Nobel has a much more elegant and feminine design than what I usually work with. I kept resizing and tweaking until it finally looked right. When I'm doing line art, I typically change the pen that I'm using or the brush that I'm using for every art piece to make it feel more consistent with the style I'm going for. In this instance, I was using the Real G pen and the Clip Studio Paint, and I continually go back and erase and smooth out the line thickness to make the lines more dynamic. I loved rendering the wings. They're honestly one of my favorite things to draw. I continued working backwards, adding more curly fantasy plants, and layering in simple trees and bushes for the background. Then came coloring. This part always feels like a coloring book moment. You pick the colors, drop them in, and then slowly bring the scene to life. Between the two characters, I probably enjoyed coloring Puzzlement the most. Their design is just detailed enough to be interesting, without being overwhelming. I also really like the addition of the bandana that Puzzlement have tied around their neck. It really gives a pop of color. I'm partial to the color orange, of course. Nobel, on the other hand, has this sleek white fur with blue markings, and wings that really stand out. She's got that elegant, mystical look that suits the setting so well. I started filling in the background, well, technically the foreground first, adding vibrant colors to the plants, leaves, rocks, and more. It's kinda bittersweet knowing most of it will get blurred out in the final image, but it still feels good putting that work in. Then I turn to the midground again. I have a brush pack that has some grass in it, so I just go over the ground with the grass brush, and then I start working in the details on the stones and hammer out the details on the grass that Puzzlement is pushing aside. I'm mostly using a grease brush, or like a pencil brush, to give that shadow some texture. When I start shading Puzzlement, I work with different layers layered on top of each other. I also add some foliage to give the illusion that Puzzlement is being hit by light that has traveled through the trees and leaves before it hit them. I add in the final touches of light hitting Puzzlement and give a special attention to the feathers because I want them to look poofy and fluffy and super soft. Next, I work on the midground. I want to make the grass look like it's almost bleached by the energy that is leaking out from the area that Nobel is in. Then there's some more work with the trees and bushes before I go back in and work on those fantasy elements. The spiky plants were really fun to render in a way that is sort of like when you're making a puzzle and you know what the final piece is gonna look like, but you still gotta put all the pieces together in a way that makes sense. Originally, I was going to do like in Jade's old art piece, where she had some of the plants be pink and some of the plants be blue. But I figured out that if I blended the colors together, it would give a really nice effect, and it would make the plants look even more magical and more saturated in a way because there's so many colors. And with all the twists and turns, I wanted it to be a hypnotic pattern, a little bit airy but also soothing in a way. You don't really know what you're looking at, but it's mesmerizing. I render in some more bushes and some more trees. This time I go a little bit lighter because they're further away from the camera. Next up, I render in the shadows and highlights around Nobel. I start with backlighting her and then I start blocking in the big shadows on her front. Since she's being lit by such a powerful light behind, I wanted to sort of bleed through her silhouette, but in a manner that is not threatening but soothing, trying to match the energy of the plants in being soft and inviting, but still giving off that vibe that there's something otherworldly about Nobel. I start going in and recoloring the line art. Instead of that harsh black or dark line art, I change it to be a slightly darker color than what the color is around that area. I feel it gives off a really nice vibe that the line art is more soft than it appears at first glance, while still being structural to the art piece. I add in the shadow of Nobel at her feet, and then I go in and add the final trees and bushes in the background. Again, they're much more lighter than what the other plants are, because they're so far away from the camera. At the end, I go in and add some shadows and highlights where I feel I want it, and add some specks of lights here and there. They don't really show through at the end, but yeah. I go over and add some more light sources, like light shining through from above, and that brings me to the end. I hope she likes it, but we'll see what she has to say. If I don't leave her completely speechless, that is. So I flipped the drawing around, so it's sort of like, well, you'll see.
Oh my god. Dude, this is okay, first of all, it's gorgeous. Second of all, I love how you took the oversaturation and just like, let's roll with it. Oh my gosh, Noble looks gorgeous in this. I love the way you did her wing.
I love drawing feathers.
I need time to process this.
1 hour later.
There are so many details. Oh my god, look at Noble, she's so cute.
Man, I had to redraw her because I originally drew her with Skirl's proportions, and I was like, no, something is wrong.
Dude, this is so cool. Also the way that, oh my gosh, the way that the dream stuff carries into the environment too, like, it's so dreamy. I really also love the light composition with, like, Noble and stuff being really bright, and then having the dark background, but also how it backlights Noble and sheds light on Puzzleman's face. It's just really good composition. I am in awe.
Thank you.
Also, like, you just saw what little me was trying to do and was like, I got it. Thank you so much.
And thank you for letting me draw it. And for Jade's redraw, she will be redrawing my character Skirl, who is one of the very first characters I ever made, and he has a very big and complicated and convoluted backstory. He is a spirit, and he's dead. In the art piece that Jade is going to be redrawing, Skirl is visiting the local city, and he doesn't really know the rules or the lay of the land, which is why there's another spirit there to help him, and that's the little raven in the top corner. His name is Corbin. I also added in, like, a meme on this one, which is the cabbage cart from Avatar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool.
As Sully said, the art piece I'll be redrawing depicts Skirl visiting the local city for the first time. And as she also stated, Skirl has a long and convoluted backstory. Luckily for me, I already know most of that story. Knowing how important this moment is for Skirl, I wanted to do it justice. As cute as Skirl looking at his own reflection is, I didn't want that to be the focus of this scene, but rather open up and portray what kind of wonders this city had to offer. In this case, a lot of baked goods. So to adjust the composition, I turned him around, keeping the pose pretty much the same, and changed the perspective slightly, both to keep the elements of interest in focus, but also for the sake of my own sanity. As much as I appreciate the meme, the cabbage cart doesn't really add anything to the scene, and with all the adjustments I did, it just wouldn't fit in anymore, so it had to go. I don't think Sully will mind though. What might be an unforgivable crime, however, is that I also ditched Corvin. Looking back on it, I am sure that I could have fit him in. I could have put him on Skirl's back, he could have been on the ground looking back at him, he could be flying, I don't know, he could have been doing so many things, but it's too late. He's gone. I can't do anything about it, which really sucks because I do think his new design is very fun. But who knows, maybe Sully will invite me back and I'll get another chance to draw him. Beyond that, I didn't really have a clear plan going in, so a lot of this is just me trusting the process and making things up as I go. I would like to say that that's not usually how I do it, but that is usually how I do it. I'm not very professional, but I will say that I did learn a lot. I had so much fun with the bakery display, both deciding what treats to add and later on with the rendering. I added bread because I like bread, a cake, cause cake, and cupcakes, because Sully's gay. Sully's favorite character from Arcane is Mel, and hindsight is 2020 because I should have made a Mel-inspired cake. The fact that I didn't bothers me, and I'm mad I didn't do it. It would have been the perfect peace offering because I took away her cabbages. But whatever. Aside from the pen I use for basic blocking, most of my rendering is done with a watercolor brush, an airbrush, and a low opacity eraser. I also use luminosity, overlay, and multiply layers. This whole art piece is also, I would say, way out of my comfort zone. I don't really draw backgrounds, especially not buildings, and it's the first fully rendered piece I've done in a while where I don't rely on line art. At least not visible line art. As you can see, I did line scroll, and I will later use those lines simply as guides to pinpoint my shading. As well as the previously mentioned brushes, I also use a gritty brush to add that crust-looking texture to the bread and the pastries. I use a basic metal render for the serving plate for the cake, utilizing luminosity and multiply layers to give it the strong contrast and shine. I forgot to press record when I sat down to do the baguettes, but my rendering process is pretty much the same as the pastries, dabbling a bit with my watercolor brush, adding the gritty texture, and then using a technique that I also use for the brioche, which is adding an orange overlay layer to give it that warm, baked look. Because I can, I will talk a little bit more about Skirl. Sully really wants to make it into a comic book someday, or rather a comic book series, and I've been very lucky to be part of her process of talking over plot points and art and character design, and it's really interesting. The basic premise is that characters who die have the opportunity to become some sort of spirit guardian in their afterlife and are gifted a mask that gives them various types of abilities. In Skirl's case, it's light powers. However, this opportunity to live on as a spirit comes with a few guidelines, and one of them being that you have to make an impression on the living world in order to stick around. And Skirl's story is basically about all the ways you can leave an impression. Skirl has been featured on Sully's channel a couple of times, but this drawing and the God meme I think are the only ones that are directly tied to his story. Back to the art, it is time to render Skirl. I slapped a multiply layer on him, and then I carved into it with my lower opacity eraser. The lower opacity eraser helps me create depth quickly. I then go over with my blend and airbrush to adjust the shapes to my liking. Once I'm happy with the first layer, I go over with my airbrush to add additional shading, and once again use my eraser to create highlights. The multiply layer is originally fully blue, but I color correct the overlay on the mask to be orange instead. Part of Skirl's light powers allows him to glow in the dark, but I wanted the main light source to be the warm light of the bakery, so he turned it off. For those of you who are familiar, it might be very obvious that I was inspired by the Bakery Dragon, which, for those of you not in the know, is a really cute children's book. I wholeheartedly encourage you to check it out, even if it's just as inspiration. The art is gorgeous, and the story itself is just really cute. Once I'm done with the shading, I go over and add some final details. Drawing his reflection, done with an airbrush on a luminosity layer, adding in some moss, grass, and ivy to the background, and a poster for jam. Because the wall was boring. And yeah, that's about it.
Do you have any thoughts before showing me?
I will say that I went a little off script with this one,
I'm excited
but
to see.
I hope you like my interpretation of the scene.
I'm just waiting to say like, oh no, my cabbages. Oh no, my cabbages. They're not there. No. Oh.
Yeah, I'm sorry, they're not there.
But it's really adorable. I like that you changed it to nighttime, so
Thank
that the
you.
glow of the bakery could really be shining through.
Yes.
And like Squirrel's reflection in the bakery is a little bit creepy, not gonna lie. Like, were you looking at like references from that Pokemon you like for the buns?
Oh, no, but I did want to incorporate a woven brioche bun because I really like Dash bun.
I like the jams. It's so much. I like that everything costs the same. But where is Corvin? Right, he's he's in the bakery stealing all the tasties.
Totally. That's why Squirrel is looking that way.
Yeah. He's like waiting. Like, can you pick up the brioche for me on the way out?
It's yummy bread. Also, you did not catch the joke with a cupcake, so I will not say anything.
Well, now I'm looking. I still don't get it.
Okay, you'll get it when you see the speed paint. It's a secret between me and the audience.
Perfect.
Thank you.
And that was all. Thank you guys for watching, and thank you, Jade, for joining.
Thank you for having me.
So, if you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe.
And that's all, folks. Bye.